Hello and welcome to the Business as Unusual podcast. I'm your host, Rick Ivanovic, and with me today we have Chris Moore, the Senior Director of Software Development from Infor. So, good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Rick. How are you today?
I'm good. So, you're currently the Senior Director of Software Development. What's your career path to get you into this role?
Sure. So it's been quite an interesting and quite a long journey for me. I started my career, I've been engineering throughout. I started my career as a systems engineer on military electronic warfare, designing algorithms for radar and lots of secret things. And then I moved into software. I made some of the earliest sort of data-enabled mobile phones. Then through various different industries, I spent a lot of time at Sky Television in the UK and at Cancer Research, one of the world's biggest charities. And a great journey for me in amazing organizations, and now into Infor, another incredible organization. Interesting journey. But throughout, I've been in engineering, both hands-on and then later in more leadership.
So military, I'm curious, but I'm sure you're not allowed to tell me.
Certainly not, no.
And Sky, yeah, of course. So what drove you to joining Infor?
Well, I think I had been looking for a company that offered a place where I could really find a home. And I think that I see around me at Infor a company where it's both internally and externally with our partners, it feels like a family. You go there and you talk to people and they're passionate about the product, they're passionate about the team. They've been working there generally a very long time, or like yourself, working with the product for a very long time. And it felt like a really good place. It felt like a very wholesome place and somewhere that I could find a home for the next part of my career. Since I joined, that's really been borne out. It's an amazing place, an amazing team, an incredible product with a great legacy.
So no regrets in joining?
No, not at all. No, I'm loving it.
Okay. Now, what is it that you like best about what you do?
Wow. I think for me, it's seeing change coming to a product and a team that has that incredible legacy. As you know, as better than I do, Sun Systems has been around for 40 years, and it's constantly driving forward for the future. And I think for me, being part of that change, being part of the continual modernization of the product and the continual refreshing of the team, really setting the team up for the next couple of decades is exciting for me, and it's a really enjoyable thing to be part of. So
what is it that makes you smile in your job day to day, if anything?
No, good days make me smile. Good days make me smile. Getting feedback that we're getting things right, getting feedback from customers, from partners that we've solved the problem, we've moved things forward. And also, I think now, particularly having got the multi-tenant product into the marketplace just over a year ago, to now see that we're able to shift the game and now driving towards more features and new functionality in the product. Because there's been a long journey, obviously, before I joined and since I joined, to develop that multi-tenant product and to get it up to speed and get it in a really good place. And now it's great to turn the dial and start delivering on features and functionality that I know the product and the community have been waiting for.
So you sound really passionate about your job and what you do at Infor and Sun Systems, which we all love. I love it. Yeah. And that makes you smile. Yeah. Okay. But let's put that aside. Okay. So when you're not at work, when you're not having to think about any of that, what really makes you smile?
I think my son. My son, he's 10 years old. He's fabulous. I'm convinced he's going to be an engineer one day, or he wants to be an inventor. But he's always coming up with new ideas, new thoughts, and things like that. So for me, it's family, it's my wife, my son, and it's the things that we enjoy doing together. And good food. I love good food.
And good food.
Bit of a fan of going to a nice restaurant.
Oh, so trying foodie,
food all around the world. This is an event is a good opportunity to enjoy some Vietnamese food. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So what makes you feel inspired and be your best self?
I think for me, it's that feeling that I'm able to be part of a really good change. So I'm not a technical expert now. I'm not I'm not a deep software expert. I'm not an architect. I'm a leader. And as a leader, the inspiring things are when you see the people around you achieving things, and you see the team achieving things and the community achieving things, and that you feel that you were part of that, part of helping to build the collaboration with different teams, part of helping to build the steps that took the team and the product to the future. That I think is really inspiring. And if you have to get your drive from that as a leader, because you're not the one who writes that bit of software. You're not the one who writes those requirements. You've got to be the change agent that helps everybody else to achieve their best work. So, yeah.
When did you have to first make that transition into becoming that leader?
Well, that's an interesting story, actually. It was a very long time ago, in more than 20 years ago now. And
you're showing your age now.
Oh yeah, no, I'm older than I look. Actually, it
21,
happened in the pub, as sometimes does over a drink. I was sat down with my current software team leader, and I was a software engineer in his team, and I'd only been in that team for a fairly short time. And he said, "Oh, I'm a bit fed up of this leadership stuff. I don't really. I want to get back to writing more software." And I said, "Well, I'll have a go." So we came back from the pub and spoke to our mutual boss and said, "We want to swap jobs." And she said, "No."
You swapped jobs?
Well, she said no. And then we said, "Well, no, let us talk you through this." And then she agreed, and we did it for a little while. I took over the team. Very interesting for me, because as a very, very young software engineer, very young person, I took over leadership of a small team, but people in that team much more experienced, more highly paid, more technical specialists than me. And that really early on showed me the role of the leader is to enable the people in the team to do the job. It's not to be the best software engineer in the team. It's to enable others. And so that was really interesting how I transitioned into leadership, and it grew from there. I was hands-on for probably another 10, 12 years after that. But just gradually since then, growing my leadership roles and taking on bigger teams and bigger challenges.
I'm curious. I sort of wonder, what if they had never said that in the pub, that they were fed up? What do you think that would have done to your trajectory or your move into the leadership track?
I think I'd still have ended up there fairly soon, because I had that instinct that while I loved writing software, I also liked working with people. I liked sort of taking the lead, whether it was a technical initiative or not. And I think I would have ended up in a similar trajectory. But it was great to start that early on with such a funny kind of twist to just begin like that. And it was like one day I was a team leader.
Have that, since that was sort of pivotal for you, have you, because now you are the leader, have you used that technique on others?
What I think I like to do is I like to think of leadership as being something that happens at all levels in an organization. You don't have to be a line manager in order to be a leader. And I think I always try and encourage that in my teams, and it's a good way to find the people who one day will want to become senior leaders. If you can give them the opportunity to lead something. And I think always try and make the distinction between that doesn't mean you give them a team to line manage initially, but you give them something to lead. You give them that ownership, and often the people who are going to be one day great leaders are the ones who'll take that from you, and they'll ask for it. They don't have to be told. But I think encouraging people at the grassroots level to take the lead on things is really powerful.
Absolutely, I think that's a very, very critical point. Leadership isn't a title. Leadership is a mindset. It's an attitude, and you're absolutely right. Providing individuals with the opportunity to lead something. Doesn't matter what the something is, and it's all part of growing people. So they're better than they even think that they can be. Now it sounds you started this at an earlier age. Maybe a lot earlier than some to do this. Do you feel that this bit has been, one of the sort of key success factors that has really helped you be successful in your role as a leader?
I think having a long experience of leadership certainly means that I've seen all sorts of situations, and I'm quite calm in the face of. My team will probably will agree with me, I'm sure, that I'm quite calm in the face of a challenge, in the face of a problem. So that's certainly helped me. But I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of leadership development, working at Sky Television for 10, 11 years. I sort of seemed to align with their leadership programs as they rolled out different programs. I aligned with each program. Right up to in the end, I was very lucky to squeeze into the sort of very senior leadership program that they ran shortly before I left, which was an amazing experience with some real guru people leading the training. So I was very lucky in that sense to be kind of highly trained as well as having a lot of experience. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, is there forgot my question now. You're going to have to edit that bit. Okay. Now, during your career so far, your career to date, what's the most important lesson that you've learned?
So I think that looking back across my career, the biggest thing is it's all about collaboration for me. I think, and in a lot of my roles, this has been how I've succeeded and how my team has succeeded is through building collaborations. And I like to think that I go into an organization and I smooth the way for collaboration. I remove the silos, I break down the walls, and I try to get everybody aligned around a big picture and be very. I think it's something to do. You have to be very humble. You have to give the credit everywhere. You can't be someone who's going, we did this. We've achieved that. I've done this. It's got to be always, I think, almost over-indexing on praising all the other teams that have helped something to be successful, and just really build those really solid collaborations, and just, I think, also being very honest. Don't. For me, it's being honest about problems. It's being honest about challenges, and that then makes it a shared challenge, and we overcome it together. So, for me, I would say to anyone going into a leadership path, it's all about building collaboration. You can't do it on your own.
Thank you. Now, the theme of this podcast and literally everything I talk about these days is business as unusual. So, what's the most unusual experience that you've ever had in business to date?
Okay. Wow. Let me sort of slightly. I'll start that again.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's a great question. I have a very unusual experience. I was being slightly discreet. I won't mention companies or anything like that. But one day I got a call passed through to me from someone who identified themselves as the chief radio operator of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, which is effectively an emergency service in the UK. And they said they'd been trying to contact us for a number of months and had never got anyone to really listen, but that they were concerned our product was interfering with emergency radio. So that was very unusual because my immediate response was, don't worry, you're now talking to the right person. Where can I meet you? And 12 hours later, I was in a lifeboat off the coast of Wales in the freezing cold in an exposure suit, listening to a radio. That was a very unusual engineering experience. And also, really quite an inspiring thing to be part of, but a little bit scary at the time. A lot of interesting agencies involved in that one.
Sounds like it. I mean, cold as well. And that's the most unusual experience you've had in business. What about outside in business? What about just in life in general?
Well, I had an interesting path to get where I was. I started at university studying languages. So I spent time in Ukraine and in Russia. There were all sorts of interesting experiences there. I think also I at one point I decided to start challenging myself and start finding things that scared me. Sort of feel the fear and do it anyway, that kind of thing. So I volunteered to be the yardsman on a tall ship without actually knowing what a yardsman was. And it
I
turns
don't know
out
what a yardsman is.
Yeah, that's the person who goes up the mast and out the yard arm and ties up the sails and things like that, which I found out shortly after volunteering for it. So that was pretty unusual. But it got me into this pattern of trying out things that scared me, and that led me to ultimately Argentine tango dancing, where I was very fortunate and met my wife after learning to dance Argentine tango. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you're still looking for more unusual experiences, given that it seems to be in your DNA, right?
Yeah, I think I've definitely slowed down a little bit on doing the scary stuff, but now it's more about family. It's more about helping my son maybe challenge himself and things like that.
So I know you're the Senior Director of Software Development.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's a bit of a mouthful. and I've heard that you're not actually doing the coding anymore, all right, because you're a leader in your illustrious career. Daft question maybe. What do you actually do in your job as the Senior Director of Software Development?
Well, I'm very fortunate to have a team of incredibly hardworking, incredibly smart engineers. And I think there are two main sides to that role. One is enabling them to do their best work. So creating the environment in which they can do their work, removing blockers, making sure we've got the right resources, making sure we've got a clear vision, a plan for the future, and a strategy. Any decent-sized development organization has challenges. Any decent-sized development organization has more asks on their time than they can possibly achieve. So it's about sort of making sure that plan is clear, that strategy is clear, and that we're putting our resources where we can. Sometimes it's about the difficult conversations. You know, the nature of leadership is not always rosy. There are always bumps in the road. And I think often it's about being the person who can listen to 5 different voices saying with great belief and compelling evidence and detail that they all have different opinions, and then working together to draw out what is the right answer, what's the priority, what's the right decision, and being able to make that decision quickly, because the last thing you want to be as a leader is the guy who sits in the corner and ruminates over the problem for 3 weeks while the problem gets worse. So, I think it's making clear decisions, setting clear direction, and enabling the incredible people in the team.
And so what skill sets do you think that requires?
For me, I think there's a sort of technical core to it, but it's more around broad engineering now. It's more around being able to understand to a reasonable degree what any of those people in the team are telling me, whether it's a DevOps problem, whether it's a software problem, whether it's a server or infrastructure problem, and knitting those together. I think there's a calmness around it. There's a level of bringing calm experience to a problem. There's a very much a customer focus element of it as well. One thing I'm particularly proud of in all my teams is I raise the level of customer awareness and customer focus in developers. I think it's very, very important for developers to be very closely connected to the experiences of the customer, because then that helps us make better decisions day to day. It helps us make a better product. And it's really sort of juggling. There's definitely a juggling multiple different competing demands on your time, being able to figure out what's the most important thing to focus on today, get the right people into the conversation. There's quite that sort of thing. It's a lot of soft skills, I would say, nowadays, with a core of sort of engineering logic in there, I guess.
Okay, it's a lot of soft skills. Now, you come from a software development background, a programming background, where that's more about the hard skills, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess originally I was definitely hard skills. In my early days as a leader, I was not sophisticated at all. I'd made many mistakes and many wrong calls. I started off very technical. I was a C coder. So as far as many of the guys nowadays are concerned, I'm a bit of a dinosaur in coding terms. I didn't have an IDE. I coded on a text editor in C, and I've still done a little bit now to just try and keep aware of the skills. But my technical hands-on skills are quite a long way behind me in terms of production readiness now. It's all about listening and understanding and making decisions.
But these soft skills are critical. Yeah. So when you look at developers, programmers that in the world, not necessarily that work for you, that can be outside the organization as well. Do they have those skills?
Some of them, I think, and it's one thing I'm very keen with my teams to do is make sure that people can progress without limit as a technical specialist. People can continue as a coder through with no limit. I think it's one of the worst things that you can do, and it's almost like a Dilbert thing that you kind of go, "Oh, you're a great engineer, but you want a pay rise and a promotion. You've got to become a manager." That's nuts to me. We need to enable our technical specialists to progress.
Absolutely.
And sometimes you need to hone those soft skills. Some people have it more naturally, and they might be suited to a management path, but it's not just managers who need those soft skills. You look at architects, principal engineers, they're coaching, they're mentoring, they're teaching others, they're having very good conversations around collaboration in problems and that sort of thing. So they have those soft skills, sometimes perhaps less sophisticated than you'd get as somebody who's a trained leader, but they're still there and they're very important. It's very rare now to write software as a one-man band in the corner just doing your bit. It's all very collaborative now.
So how do you address those soft skills in your organization? How do you, infuse that into your team?
Well, I enjoy coaching. So I do, with my first line team, I do quite a bit of leadership coaching and that sort of thing. But also I try to actively coach others. So at the moment, one of the initiatives I'm doing in Infor is public speaking skills. And I'm actually setting up some workshops to teach people public speaking. It's one of my hobbies almost that I really enjoy, getting up on stage and speaking. So some of it's sort of active training, some of it's, intervention, some of it's, occasionally just being brave enough to give the feedback and say, look, that conversation wasn't so good. Let's talk about how you could have achieved what you wanted in a more collaborative way or that sort of thing.
So with all these skills that you're bringing and the fact that you are a coach, and I love coaches, okay, I'm biased, I'm a coach as well. But is this something new that you're bringing to your team? Because I'm sure, you've been leading this team at Infor for a couple of years now, and you're shaping it.
Sure, yeah. Is it new? I think there's definitely been an increase in our customer focus. There's been probably improvements. I'd like to think I've led improvements in collaboration between different teams. But fundamentally, Sun Systems is a family. And I think that family extends to the partner network. I remember on my first day walking around the office and one person introduced himself and he said, I've been here 10 years. I'm the new guy. And that's the way it is in the Sun Systems family. There's such great legacy there, and the people have been passionate developers, passionate support people on that product for decades, and that's very, very valuable. And people care about the product, they know each other, they care about the team, and it does feel like a family. So it's in shaping the team, you've got to be cognizant of that there is that legacy there. You don't just come in and break things. You've got to come in and think, I took time to think about some changes. Where do we want to invest strategically? What will make us ready for the next 20 years of great product development, that sort of thing.
Wonderful. Now, you mentioned raising the awareness with the team of customers, I think.
Yeah.
And what they want. How do you actually do that?
Well, it's a variety of things. I think the first thing is for me to really engage and build a collaboration at a leadership level across support and sales organizations with partners, etc. And then to help to expose the team more to that, to identify places where perhaps our processes are a little bit siloed and put blockers in the transfer of information. And then occasionally just to sort of corral the troops almost and say, right, well, today we're going to get on a call with this customer, with this partner, and talk through the problems, and we're going to see the problems happen. And I think sometimes for developers that's quite a new experience, but it's becoming much more something we do that we go and see firsthand. What is the problem? What does it look like? How does it manifest? And that helps us accelerate fixing the problem. It helps us to understand better a feature request, to really talk to people and take away those silos. And I'm very fortunate that we have a great leadership team in Sun Systems. All of the senior leaders are very collaborative. They're all open to this, and they're all really, really keen actually to build much stronger collaborative relationships, to share about what's going on in our world. And I'm very lucky. So even when I say I've made a horrible mistake, guys, and something's gone really wrong, they'll accept that, and they'll be sort of almost like, well, thanks for telling us, rather than what have you done? You know? Yeah.
So you mentioned feature requests. I'm sure you get thousands of them. How do you filter them and prioritize them and pick the ones, that you're actually going to develop?
Yeah. So the proper answer to that is really I don't, as a developer and as not a domain expert. I've worked in many different industries. I'm not an accountant. I haven't got that financial background. So I rely a lot on, as it should be, I rely a lot on Tarek, for example, our product director. I rely on Alan, who leads our sales organization, to help me understand what is most important, to help me understand between two competing priorities. And it's really my job and our job as the development team to be the delivery engine for their vision, rather than necessarily to have a very opinionated vision ourselves of where the product should go. Because I think actually that can be a trap if you let the development team decide to too much of an extent what's actually needed in the product. You could be missing the customer voice, the sales voice, the product voice. So it's important that we are led by those teams that have a much stronger awareness of the domain, of the landscape, of the customer needs, the partner conversations. But we're also part of those where we can be.
So how do you blend that with the fact that if you have to deliver that, that could be a technical challenge? And some things may be a lot easier and others could be incredibly challenging. Yeah.
So I think that's where the collaboration comes in, because the wish list for any software development team is always twice, three times what you can deliver. I've never worked anywhere where it wasn't, and it's probably
that's normal, right?
Yeah, it's probably as it should be, right? You don't want a development team who are able to deliver everything and maybe sometimes delivering things that don't add value. You always want to be making those good decisions between value here and value there, which is more important. So for me, it's a lot of collaborative conversation. I'll have conversations with the entire leadership team around, these are the things we would like on the roadmap. We've assessed them. This is what we think we can actually deliver. These are the playoffs. If you want to go after that feature, then this will have to take a back seat. On the other hand, we could do these three things instead, and maybe those are better. So it's very collaborative conversation. It's not a decision that ultimately happens in one place. It happens as a team, which is as it should be.
Okay. Now I'm curious. AI, generative AI, it's sort of becoming household language around the world, and I think it's touching people whether they like it or not. What are your views of this, and how it should or shouldn't be in a product?
Yeah. So I think it is a very important thing for the future. I think it is a new step change in user experience, where a lot of the less value adding work can be taken away effectively and can be done for you, so that your skilled people can focus on the decisions that require that skill and that experience. It's something that also I think needs to be done with care, because if I look at it in software engineering, for example, which is more of my sort of comfort zone, you can get generative AI to write software for you, but do you know the provenance of that software? Now, the generative AI has taken software from all sorts of sources and used it to give you the answer to the question you've just asked. And you don't know what the licensing terms were of that source software. You don't know where that's come from. You could be exposing yourself to open source software license risks, for example, if you incorporate that in your product. You also have the risk that the software that you give the AI to work on then becomes part of the AI public domain without intention. So what we're seeing now is tools developing that allow you to have an AI capability in your software engineering that is ring-fenced and that only uses curated data sources and keeps your own data sort of safe. So we're a bit cautious about, we don't want engineers using the AI tools at this point, but we are working towards a future where that will be incorporated in the development in a safe and sensible way. But I mean, there's no doubt it's going to be the new sort of big thing, I think, in terms of improving user experience and making products more usable, more intuitive, all that sort of thing.
And are there any plans to incorporate AI in any shape or form into Sun systems in the cloud?
So that's more of a Tarek question, but I do know that Infor as a whole, through Infor OS, is exploring AI capabilities. They've had a level of AI capabilities for some time. They're certainly exploring that further, and that includes, I believe, generative AI, but I'm not qualified to speak on behalf of anybody's roadmap. But we're well aware of that as a coming thing in the landscape. Yeah.
Okay, sticking with technology. Okay, AI is, as we've been discussing, is pretty much top of mind. But what are other technical trends which may not be so apparent to people, but are going to be important for what you do in software development in your team?
Sure.
That we should be aware.
So I think the first thing there is to think about we're not a tiny startup. We're not on that sort of risk profile where we want to be trying everything new in order to hopefully break out into we are a very established product. We've got a very mature customer base, a very valuable customer base, and for us, there's levels where there might be new trends in software engineering that we wouldn't go near because our customer base is too important. Our need to change isn't so high in that sense. But for me, there is a set now of fundamental engineering principles in software engineering that we are moving towards, we've started on, and we're continuing towards. So things like using microservices, using API first development, APIs, open APIs for everything that we do. Is separating out front ends and back ends so that our front end experiences are using the same APIs that we provide to partners, to customers to make their own integrations, for example. And that's definitely our strategic direction of travel. We have an incredible history in the product. We have some quite historic code still there. We've done a lot of modernization, but there's more to come. And I think there's always that best practice now to decompose your monolith, to build microservices, API first development, and really nice, modernized front end experiences that use the APIs so that they are not fragile. They're decoupled effectively from the logic behind them.
And following this strategy, which is already being executed, does that mean more rapid development?
It leads to more rapid development. It leads to, and that's why it's now just a best practice way of thinking now. And if you built a new product, you'd just do it like this from the scratch, right? But if you've got a legacy product, you want to be moving towards this. It leads to a world where it's easier to change the software. It leads to a world where change is more encapsulated. It leads to a world where zero downtime updates, for example, become much more possible. And we're now in a position with Sun where some of the software is in this new world state, componentized, microservices, serverless even, and can be updated with zero downtime. But we still have a logic core there that is resistant to that kind of modernization. So we're very lucky in the IBU to have some investment in the product in the future. I'm now recruiting a new team. I've got a team forming up in India who will help us to really accelerate some of that modernization work. And it's part of a series of changes that I've agreed with Andrew and the leadership team that will help us to take this incredible product forward for the next 2 decades.
Okay. Now, I know you're not necessarily customer facing, unlike Tarek, but if you could give existing users of Sun systems, one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, that's a tricky one because I don't want to get into the domain where I'm not an expert. one piece of advice, I think it's if you're not already up to date in the software versions, if you're not already looking to the cloud, then start looking, because it is so much better a landscape to be in that cloud where we're taking care of so much of the administration of the product. You know, we're taking care of the server infrastructure, we're taking care of the scaling, so that month end isn't a panic time. Month end becomes, you know, we've got the scale to handle that, where security updates are rolled out for you almost immediately. You know, so some of the one of the parallels I tend to draw is if you're in an on-premise world, we have find a security vulnerability. It might be in a third-party library or something like that we use. And if it's highly enough prioritized, then we have a 7-day turnaround to fix and release that update. Now, in the multi-tenant cloud, that means it will be fixed, released, and live on your infrastructure with your product. So you'll be cleared away from any risk associated with that vulnerability within that 7-day period. That's our KPI for the most severe issues. If you're in an on-premise world, that means we'll make a patch set available. You need to get your IT, your users, everybody aligned to roll out that update. Maybe your partner needs to get involved, and it's just very difficult for you to turn that around in the same kind of timescale. So yeah, my advice would be update, get to the latest patch sets. If you're in a single tenant or on-premise world, get up to 6.4 if you're in that world. But look at migrating into the multi-tenant cloud, where it is going to be the focus for future development. It's going to be far faster moving in terms of fixes, updates, etc., and just an incredibly secure environment to be in.
So, by the sounds of it, you know, if you're on this multi-tenant cloud, if there is a vulnerability, it's patched and it's there, and you wouldn't notice because it's just been done.
Yeah, so we have a sliding scale based on how the vulnerability is rated, and that's all across Infor, part of the secure software development lifecycle. And at the most extreme case, which, you know, somebody's published a vulnerability at a high score and it's out in the wild, yeah, that can be patched within days and live on the multi-tenant platform within days. We have the ability to do a release, a critical fix update. Sometimes that will happen with zero downtime, in which case you may not even notice it's happened. Other times we will have to call a short downtime window to apply that. And often that you'll find that every month we do a routine update. Every month there's a continual process, identify security, update any vulnerabilities that we know about, fix them in that monthly release. And so you are constantly getting the best that we have to offer in terms of security patching.
So in theory, if you are not on the cloud, you are supposed to be doing that on premise. Does that actually happen?
I would say it's variable. We certainly have many customers using much older versions of the product. We quite often have conversations encouraging customers to update their patches. I know partners take a big part of this load as well. Partners are always encouraging customers to keep up to date. So does it happen? Certainly, some organizations are extremely diligent. You know, they have their patch windows pre-prepared. In single tenant, we have generally an agreement with the customer that we'll provide the patches and perform the patches frequently. But it's unlikely that you're going to be as fast as we will be in terms of updating on the multi-tenant cloud. Because by the time we've released that software, it's live for you on the multi-tenant. There's always a further stage if you're on premise.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. So for those customers or prospects who've expressed any concern about security, we've heard that. You know, if you're on this multi-tenant cloud, it's just being done for you in the background. You really don't have to worry about it. Whereas if you're on premise, yes, you will get the patch or whatever it is from whatever the vulnerability was from wherever it's come from, and you still have to do something with it. There are extra steps, and that's totally within either it's up to the customer really, and the partner to make sure that's happening.
I mean, extra steps and no doubt extra cost as well to apply that and to have the people that can do that and
I think it's the delay. It's not just the steps and the cost. It's the elapsed time and the speed at which how much faster it can be deployed on the cloud that will always, by the sounds of it, will always be faster than on-premise.
Yeah, I think it's just the reality of the landscape. By the time we publish the fix, we've applied it on the cloud. It's still to be applied. So inevitably there's a delay if you're on-premise. But
do you feel this is sort of a trend, a global trend, as in like why should companies be running stuff on-prem and having to look after all that infrastructure when you can run it on the cloud and it's all done for you?
Yeah, I think undoubtedly. I think most of the customers I talk to, and I'm not talking to customers all day long, but I do frequently, end up in conversations. They're all talking about moving to the cloud. They didn't necessarily always have a route to the cloud, and I think with our multi-tenant product, they now have that route, and we're seeing that I think in customers who are perhaps on much older versions who've been in smaller organizations where the single tenant route wasn't viable for them, but the multi-tenant route is viable, and it gives them that route to the cloud, and we're seeing that picking up pace, I believe.
Thank you. Now, you've had a long and successful career. It's a very checkered career as well. I was very, very surprised that here you are leading a software development team on probably what I believe is the world's best accounting solution on the planet, or maybe in the universe, because we don't know what's happened off the planet. But you studied languages at university.
Yeah.
Okay, so question I have is, what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone just starting out in their career who, after listening to this podcast, wants to be as successful as you?
Gosh. So I think it's always got to be about learning and collaboration. You can't do it on your own. There were days many decades ago where you could be an engineer who just worked alone largely, and you were in your own little silo and you had your own knowledge and that kind of thing. I just don't feel that happens anymore. Software engineering is a collaborative discipline. It's far faster moving than it used to be. The rate of change in the software that you have to keep up with, the change in your languages, the framework that you're working with, all of that kind of thing is so rapid now that you have to be constantly learn through collaboration, work with people in a collaborative way if you want to be successful.
Thank you. That's great insight. And for, if you're out there and you want to be as successful as Chris, really pay heed to that advice. Now, Chris, I've asked you lots and lots of questions. Now, is there a question that you expected me to ask you, but I didn't? Okay. And whatever it is, how would you answer it?
I haven't got one at the moment. I think you've done very well. You've covered a lot of aspects of my career, a lot of aspects of what I do.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, I don't know. Off the cuff, no, I haven't got one.
Great. Wonderful. Well, it's been an absolute delight speaking to you today, Chris, and sharing your experience with all our listeners. Now, if people wanted to get in contact with you and you wanted them to contact you, what's the best way that they can find you online?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Is probably the best thing. I'm quite quiet on other social media, but